All right, let's talk about playing in key. Key is a very simple concept, and I'm going to try to put it out so that it's very simple and not complex at all. You're going to have to look into it and study a little bit, but the basic understanding of it, let's address the basic understanding of what that means. Okay, we talked about scales, right? And we talked about the major C scale. So you've got C through C, right? And that's the major scale, right? So when you're looking at that, you're looking at it's got no sharps or flats. Now, the thing about playing in key is the first part of it, we talked about building scales and then harmonies and chordal structures. Now, when you go to play those in key, that if you're playing in the key of C here, the real basic concept to understand is you've got C through B and then C again with no black keys in there at all, no sharps or flats anywhere, and that's the key of C or its relative A minor. Now, you know, relative minors are real simple. As you start out with the root of whatever key, the root of whatever scale you're working on that's going to work out to the key, the root of that key, and you go down one half step, another half step, and another half step, and you're at the relative minor. Does that make sense? And it's in the same key, and it's the same notes. So that's very simple to understand. And if you're in the relative minor, half step, half step, half step, now you're in the relative major key, which is the same notes. It's the same key, the same scale with the same tonal qualities and same notes that you can use in the key and scale. So that's real simple concept to understand. The next thing is that when you play in key and you're talking about key, that major C, that key of major C, and this goes with any key, that you go C through B and then back to C again. So what happens there is you've got those scale notes that comprise that scale that are the composed notes that make up that key that you're playing in. Now, the thing is, when you're playing in key, is that you can only use those notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. You can only use those notes to play in key. Any note that you play that's not those notes is not in key. That doesn't mean you can't do it. That just means you have left the key that you are playing from. It's that simple. Don't get it any more complicated than that. The basic understanding of that is so simple, and some people get so confused by it because you'll say, okay, well, you know, the concept is real simple. That, okay, here is the key of G. So we start out with the root of G. Its relative is E minor. So you have G major and E minor is its relative minor key. And why that is, we'll talk about later, but basically because when you're playing in major, you're trying to use major chords, and when you're playing in minor, you're trying to play minor chords. So there's major and minor chords in the key of G, but when you're playing major key of G, that you're focused more on the major chords. When you play, you know, E minor, the relative minor to G, that you're trying to focus more on the minor chords than the major chords. And it's that simple. Don't make it any more complicated than that. So the other thing is you've got, okay, the key of G. You're going to go G, A, B. Well, if you look at the key of G and the time signature, it's got a sharp F here, correct? So what does that mean? If I go G, A, B, C, D, E, and then it's got a F sharp, what do I do? Well, that means you don't play that F and you play the F sharp instead, which means you omit that F from that key. And you go to F sharp and then G. It's that simple. Don't make it any more complicated than that. That means anytime you see sharp signals or flat signals, flat signs, that means that in the 7 tones that you're playing in, or however many tones that you're playing in there for whatever scale, that if they're sharp or flat, that means that if it's like you've got a D sharp, right? Or an E flat. So you're going C, D. Here's a harmonic minor scale. Real simple understanding. You're going C, D, D sharp, right? Or E flat. How it's going to be written in the scale is that E is going to be flat. It's going to be written as C, D, E flat. That the flat up in here, when you write it as a key, that you're going to put a flat sign on that E, on the E note, so that they understand they don't play the E, they play the E flat. And the reason why you don't make it D sharp instead of E flat is because you're already playing D. You can't go C, D, D sharp, because when they look at this, they're going to see D is sharp, which means they're going to not play the D, they're going to play D sharp. So the reason why you would make it E flat is so they know to play that D, but when they get to E, that they play E flat, but they still play that D. So I hope I made that very simple so that you understand what you're looking at here and why that's written that way. And you've got a real good understanding now of why when we talked about sharps or flats, and that's a huge aspect of why. So that you're looking at a piece of music and you're looking at, okay, E major here. I'm going to play E major. Okay, I'm going to go, these notes are going to be sharp. That means what? So if I say that D note's going to be sharp, or if I say that F note's going to be sharp, what does that mean? That means I don't play that F note, I play the F sharp. Does that make sense? And this right here is the G note. So if I see that sharp, what do? I don't play the G note, I play G sharp. And it's that simple, and it works the same way when you're dealing with flats. If it's showing you something that's a flat sign, then you understand the same thing. It's the same concept, that when you run into that note, that you don't play that note, you play the flat of that note. Does that make sense? And I explained to you just now why. That way that you don't get confused. In a harmonic minor, as an example, that, the harmonic minor scale, that you're playing C, D, and then D sharp, you can't write that on here as, if you sharp that D, they're not going to play the D, they're going to play D sharp. So you're going to have to make it what? E flat. Correct? So now you're knowing that E doesn't get played, the E flat gets played, instead of making it D sharp, because that, you can't write that. You can't write play D, but, and D sharp. It ain't going to work that way. So that's the basic concept of key. And the most important, that's the basic, most pertinent things that you need to understand about what key is and what that means. And you need to download something like this, or take a snapshot of this if you want. I don't know. It's going to do the same thing with whatever kind of, these are all major and minors, but it works the same way if you're playing a melodic scale, or a melodic minor, or harmonic minor, or diminished scale. If you're going to write a song all in diminished or all in augmented, which probably ain't going to happen, but if you did, it would work the same way. You would sharp and flat those notes, the ones you weren't playing. Does that make sense? So they would know that you play that D and the E is flat, because you can't sharp that D for the reasons I explained. And that's the basic concept, so that you understand what you're looking at when you're looking at key here. The next understanding of it is to understand that, real basic concept is you're playing in C. C has no sharps or flats. It's all the white keys from C to C. So you can play all the white keys all day long, no matter what you want to do, and you're playing in key of C, and you just have fun and mess around all day long. All right, so and the understanding is that when you put chords together to play in key and play notes, whether you're playing melodies, or you're playing leads, or you're playing chords or harmonies, that you can only use the notes that are in that key. And it's very simple. That's why the key is put together. And as you make it more complex, there's a lot of times where you're going to go out of key. You might decide to play that A flat there, or that, that minor sixth, in a chord or something like that. And you understand the difference there when I'm talking about the scale. I was talking about the scale. I said flat. I said the flat, A flat, or the flat sixth. And when I was talking about the chords, I went minor sixth. So that, that a lot of times I'll do that because I'd get confused about that. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. So I don't get confused by that at all. When I'm talking about scales or chordal structures, that it's a flat, an A flat or a flat six. And when I'm talking about chords, it's a minor, does that make sense? And I try to keep it that simple. So that's the basic understanding of playing in key and what key is and what that means to you, So you're looking at here and you're looking at G, and they say, here's G, and you understand what the relative minor is, that just like C, that, you're talking about playing in the key of C. You play all those notes, all the white notes up C again. And the relative minor, half step, half step, half step down to A, And it's three half steps, 1, 2, 3, or 3 half steps up, 1, 2, 3, to major or relative minor, relative major, relative minor, but they're the same notes. Does that make sense? It's just based on major chords when you're playing major, and you're using more of the minor chords when you're playing in minor. And we'll get into that because we haven't really talked yet about, how that structure, how major and minor chords go together inside of a scale and how you play them. But we'll get into that in the next video. Trust me. I just wanted you to understand what that meant by key, so that you understand the basic concept of what they're talking about when they say key, so it's not confusing. And I hope I made that very simple so that you could understand that concept. And so when you're looking at this, you understand exactly what that means. You understand that they're talking about the F sharp major scale or the D sharp minor scale. You understand how many notes are in that. You understand why these are sharped, or why, if they're doing it, if you're playing like a A flat major scale, why these are flatted and what that means to you to play in the key of whatever key that happens to be. So I hope I made that real simple so that concept is very easy to understand. And I expect you to get in MuseScore and when it asks you to, you want to open up a new song, and, be flat, major, minor, or, trying to make a harmonic minor, song, and figure out what, notes are going to be sharp or flat, so you can have some understanding and play around a little bit so you can understand that, and so that, it's easy for you to look at and understand what notes are going to be sharp or flat and why they're sharp or flat for playing in key. And that, you can only use those notes to build chords or to use for your leads, your melody, or your chordal structures playing in that key. So I hope that was real simple and it was fairly easy to understand what they talk about when they say key. Peace, hope, love.